Let me introduce on stage Sharon Doyle. Don't worry, Sharon, if I drop the shoe, you can drop the mic.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you, Erica. I'm very, very excited to be here. And it's always such a pleasure, actually, to work with Erica. Erica and I have some history going back to Travelport days as well. So I remember eating Mexican with her in Atlanta, well before, actually, I was moving to Guadalajara, which I've been in for the last 2 years. So congratulations, Erica, on the new role. I know you're going to ace it. And I think you guys are really fortunate to actually have Erica as your president as well. So thank you. Okay, so I am super excited to be here today to talk to you about trends in technology and corporate travel. So we're going to kind of cover both. I'm not going to talk about NDC. So there is a further session on that later on, but that isn't something I'm actually going to cover today. What I'm more focused on is what's actually changing as a result of kind of big societal and technology changes, and what's actually happening with our travelers. How do they think, and how are they actually beginning to think about corporate travel and how to respond on that? So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about that. Many of you are already customers of Deem, but for those of you that are not, Deem is an online booking tool. So in 2023, we became wholly owned by Travelport. It's a we're fully GDS agnostic. In fact, actually, most of my customers are Sabre. Having been a Travelport person, last night walking around with a Sabre lanyard is always a bit of a, you know. But actually, most of my customers are Sabre customers as well. So we support Sabre, Amadeus, Apollo, WorldSpan, and Galileo. And I mention that because this actual research is actually coming from the Travelport research arm that we're going to see here today. Okay, so before we kind of deep dive into the trends themselves, I wanted to kind of first acknowledge a little bit that kind of corporate travel is back, right? The very fact that we're actually in this room is kind of testament to that. And I know it might seem maybe a little bit old now to be still talking about the pandemic. But you know, it's less than 2 years ago that many of us were actually still wearing masks on airlines, on some of the airlines. And I was traveling a lot at that time through APAC, so I couldn't still actually go to many of the countries that are open again. So that's less than 2 years ago. So it's quite still soon, especially in the travel industry. That aside, COVID did have a massive impact on the corporate travel industry. And it continues actually to have that impact today because travel actually looks different than it did pre-COVID. Growth itself actually shows no sign of stopping at all. And in fact, actually, the predictions now are that by the end of 2024, we will be back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of corporate spend. But business travel is undergoing more fundamental, transformational, big shifts because of society changes and technology changes. So what is it that actually has changed during that time? And that's kind of the question that we're going to look at today. So numbers aside, I'm not going to talk about numbers. I'm going to talk about what's different and actually what do travelers think. Okay, so before we actually look at the trends, I do want to kind of cover an overarching theme that will thread its way through a lot of the trends that we're going to talk about today. There's a lot of T's in that sentence. And that actually is the rise of remote working. Business travel is logistical necessity for many people, think consultants, sales reps, etc. But for others, people travel because their organizations ask them to. And those organizations ask people to travel because face-to-face time, meetings, is more impactful and actually contributes to the bottom line of the organization. So according to, in fact, a GBTA and Uber report, 87% of employees actually agree with that corporate travel can actually contribute to the company's bottom line. Nonetheless, many organizations out there are still struggling to get people moving again, and that's because those people have moved to working from home and are remote workers. By 2025, the projection is that over 32 million US employees will be remote workers. That's a phenomenal number, right? And many of those employees were not employees that previously would have worked for travel before, or previously done corporate travel before. Since remote working actually kind of changes the very nature of work itself, similar to what Erica was saying, that means that we're actually impacting corporate travel also, and we have to rethink what corporate travel means in this world. Corporate travel has actually become uniquely complex, and I'm sure you guys can attest to this more than even me. It's a balancing act where everyone is kind of involved between technology providers, TMCs, corporate travel managers, and the traveler themselves. So let's go ahead and look at some of these key themes that we're going to talk about today. All right, the first trend, and very, very much again aligned with what Erica said, is that the employee well-being has actually moved to the top of the agenda for many organizations. Research shows actually that remote working offers employees a better balance of life and a better balance of quality of life. So when traveling for work, people actually want to bring that quality with them. And they're now no longer willing to kind of give up some of the things that they may have been able to or were willing to give up a few years ago. It doesn't actually mean that people are not wanting to work or wanting to travel. That's not true. They do want to go. But when they do, they kind of expect that same freedom, flexibility, and personal time that they actually enjoy in their daily lives. 35% of employees want companies to think and support them in terms of their well-being. And in a strong employment market, if well-being suffers, people won't stick around. And this is a phenomenal number. 87% of employees said that they would think about leaving an organization that is not focused on their well-being. That's a huge number. And leavers cost companies a lot of money in training, in replacement costs, in recruiting. All of that contributes to either directly in terms of cost or against lost revenue. So the first recommendation here, in particular for kind of travel managers in the audience, is to think about how you balance your corporate policy cost-saving goals with customer or with employee satisfaction. I was actually just reading this week in a different article about an organization that is partnering with a different TMC to think about how they will actually score for each trip, how impactful that score is in terms of the number of trips an employee is making, but also how difficult that itinerary is. So if it's like an early start, red eyes, long haul, last minute, they'll actually start to score those things. And if the score is high, it will start to become the operation of the TMC in some cases, but also technology providers to think about how they might recommend changing that trip through personalization. So scoring is kind of a thing that, using that data, and that will all be driven by AI as well, to actually think about how is this trip impacting the person's well-being. So if you want the top people working for you and delivering, companies are really going to have to go beyond the kind of blanket travel policies we've seen in the past. Okay, during the pandemic, many people were hired in locations that were far away from their designated offices. I was talking to some people this morning, I was saying, okay, well, did you move there, or were you always living there? But a lot of people have actually moved away from those designated offices, and other moves moved from the big cities to those smaller locations. Digital nomad actually became a term that we used as career options. I've met people, I said, what do you do? And they go, I'm digital nomad. I'm not entirely still sure what that actually means. But I've met people, especially in Mexico, that's how they'll actually respond. Companies, meanwhile, got to hire people in different locations, mainly, many of them will say for cost savings in cheaper areas. But for many of these roles, travel wasn't a thing in those job descriptions before. So fast forward 3 years, and there's now a new ask to these employees. And that ask is to come to the office every once in a while. So while business travel may never or wasn't part of that job role in the past, now their commute is actually thinking about getting them on a plane versus then hopping out in a car. This trend has actually been dubbed super commuting. So you'll hear that term being mentioned around. But unlike the regular commute, there's actually more grounds here for organizations and companies to pay for that trip and that commute. Relocated employees are now taking more trips to corporations' headquarters, most of which, 70% in fact, the company is either paying for or partially paying for across the globe. So it changes again that nature of how we think about corporate travel as well. So with many of these new types of working arrangements means there's a huge opportunity again for travel managers to rethink those corporate travel policies that were all based around cost savings in the past. Now, it's easier said than done. I'm sure many of you guys are sitting in either with bosses that are either in the CFO or in the financial area of your organization. And this will be, I think, some education that we'll have to bring back to our CFOs and to different CFOs across the organization, changing that kind of move from T&E out of that cost-based example into more HR and retention. Okay, so still seeing actually here this kind of trend or that theme around remote working. Many people now enjoy more freedom, of course. So it no longer actually feels natural to them for corporate travel and when they're traveling to be any different. Business travelers actually expect to see all the range of options that they see in their leisure work. So NDC is going to be included within that, and we have to figure out how we actually add that content in there. And 88% of travelers actually want full transparency into that choice. So think about how we, either in an OBT or even as if somebody is emailing you, they want to see more information about what things have been left on the table. And we've got to think about how we actually display and show that to users as well. What it doesn't mean, very much so, is it doesn't mean that they don't want the support of the TMC. They absolutely do. They actually need the TMCs to help us navigate that choice. It just means that they want more flexibility and more choice in what they buy, as well as who they travel with and who they stay with. And all of that kind of contributes to that well-being that we're seeing as a theme as well. Yep, travel policies, the ones we all know are there to keep a lid on cost, and often that's probably the main success metric that we're actually thinking about when we think about policies. But those policies do not reflect these new priorities of well-being, retention, and productivity. So there's a huge opportunity again for us, for travel managers, to really lead the change in that now. And I think that World Travel are really thinking about those kind of changes, fundamental changes in the corporate travel industry that we're going to have to start to address. It's also, if we think about it in our personal lives, I guess, that we're also more closer to the planning, the booking, the servicing part of our leisure trips. So think about the work that we do and how we use the tools that are available to us over technology. And the question then becomes, why is corporate travel any different? So, modern, this is my pitch, I guess, on Dean, modern, travel-centric, mobile-first. Corporate booking tools are a big part of that, and whether it's Steam or Concur or whoever, those tools need to have the right contents in them, and they need to be able to book, and customers need to be able to book, and travelers need to be able to book and service on those tools as well. Okay, Number 4, sustainability. Yeah, so companies, and I'm sure all of you are under mounting pressure to meet sustainability goals. Very, very strong focus on this across Europe in particular. And I'll come back to that in a second, but that's only coming your way faster, I think, than before in terms of regulation. These aren't just pressures coming from government and environmental bodies either. They are pressures that I'm sure you're seeing coming from actually the business travelers that you work with as well, who want to really understand the environmental impact of their trips. 63% of customers that companies that we asked are actually investing more in sustainable travel at the moment. And 80%, it's a huge number when you think about it, 80% of travelers want more sustainability options in how we actually place options in front of them. So they want to understand that better. And a quarter of business travelers, getting into your Gen Z here as well and beyond, they would actually refuse to travel on some options if sustainability is poor for that particular trip. It's important to know that this isn't actually about carbon offsetting. So if you're thinking about carbon offsetting, that is not what this is about. This is actually about understanding the fundamental carbon footprint of the trip itself. So you really need reliable and certified numbers when you're thinking about that carbon characteristic. Choices can then be more informed and reporting will become more accurate, and you will really know whether you're actually, getting towards your carbon goals as well. And this, as I said, is something that governments and regulators are increasingly calling for. That question of models is actually something that you'll probably see a lot across the press. You'll hear things like the travel impact model or the ICAO model or the ICAO plus model. And you really need to actually get to grips with those, because various regulations and governments, they're only going to start to actually allow you to use certain models in your own carbon emission calculations. So you have to actually really be thinking about which are certified or not. Booking.com, in fact, actually, I don't know whether any of you guys saw this, I think it's only last week, they were pushed to remove their own carbon calculation certification from their hotel website because the EU government were concerned about greenwashing. So that the actual values that Booking were displaying, or the way that they were even displaying it, was actually considered not very, it confused travelers. So think about, like, this is 1 green leaf versus 2 green leaf. Well, is 1 green leaf bad, or is 1 green leaf good? It's a green leaf, so it's okay, right? But actually the way that we were showing it, or the way that they were showing it, 1 green leaf actually was a below average hotel carbon emission. So really understanding the displays and how we think about those sustainability choices is going to become really important. So I really urge you to get kind of educated on the different models. The travel impact model seems to be one that's actually kind of solidifying around the globe. So you'll see TIM being mentioned quite a lot, actually. So if you're interested in that one, certainly look at that. And yeah, we're only going to really see these types of rules solidify globally in the, I think, very, very short future. Okay, so in order then to persuade employees, right, to leave their cozy home offices and their friends and family, we really have to think about how we make the prospect of travel as appealing and as purposeful as possible. This means that we actually have to start to provide leisure time under the umbrella of corporate travel. Yeah. It's not only letting the traveler book with an airline or hotel that they may want to book with. Actually, business travelers want a lot more than that. They want paid for premium experiences, and they want additional paid time off. But more than any of those things, what we hear is that they want to be able to blend business and leisure travel together. In the last 2 years, roughly half of business travellers, in fact, have included additional personal time in at least one of their trips. And a further 61%, and basically anything over 40% is a high percentage when you do these kind of scores, but 61% would like corporate travel policy to allow for some leisure time, plus the freedom to bring partners and families join them at the employee's expense. Okay, so it's not additional costs, but to be able to manage and think about that. So it's a massive opportunity for companies to make business travel more rewarding. But as you all know, the complexities of how you do multiple payments and how does that work in the case of servicing is probably more the point. So when something goes wrong is a complex challenge that hopefully I think a lot of the technology can help us solve as we go forward. Okay, and last but not least in terms of my trends, and I couldn't leave a trend session go by without talking, of course, about AI and artificial intelligence. So our last trend is definitely about AI and automation. I would say that there is still a fair amount of hype, not just in the travel industry, but globally with regards to AI. But what I would say is that the reality is that it is accelerating faster than I've ever seen any other trend accelerate before, with actually real benefits coming out day to day. Erica joked about blockchain. So I mean, because that's my background as a technologist. So we started, I've been looking at blockchain since I think before it was called blockchain, but that was one of those trends, that it was all hype, so it's going to change the world, it's going to change how reservations are made. And it kind of slowly kind of diminished a little bit, and now it's kind of picking up again. And there is this kind of always this trend or kind of line around technology and how you kind of get to the hype and then the reality of it, and then it starts to build up again. But AI is actually one of those things that's really kind of accelerating out there way more than other trends I've ever seen. And it's particularly true in our industry, I would say, when it's used to help people when things go wrong. So in the case of disruption. And there's a lot of external factors out there that cause unexpected disruption at the moment. And in terms of our travelers, 69% of frequent flyers actually think of disruption as normal going at the moment. But 1/3 of them, now, this is always one that I debate, 1/3 of those travelers, so your travelers, actually think that they don't get the support they need, or when something goes wrong, that they don't know who to call or what to do in the case of an incident. Now, I always laugh at that because I'm very aware of how much you try to educate the travelers and you keep telling them the same thing, but it'll be that case where they're listening, but it's not until the event happens that they're actually kind of, shit, like I never really listened to that. Now it's like, now it's happening to me. So a lot of that does go on. So we have to think about ways of being able to respond to that. And I think further, all areas of the travel industry, and I really admire you guys in WTI that you didn't leave people go, but there is still a serious staffing challenge out there. So people have left the industry and it's difficult to hire people back into it again. So these staffing challenges, squeezes on revenue that we're all experiencing, as well as that increase in disruption, are putting a big strain on all of our travel programs. And I think this is really where automation and AI can help you and the TMCs support travelers more. And I think focusing maybe on 1 or 2 use cases within the AI world over the next 2 years is probably a better way to think about than trying to kind of deal with AI everywhere, because there's so many things it can do. But actually, I think maybe the area of disruption is one in the travel industry that really kind of cries out for a lot of reinvention. Travelers themselves, and especially those younger ones, again, they're increasingly turning to new technology to help them manage that disruption. And 77% of people that we asked have used chatbots, but more importantly, and this is really importantly, that 77%, they also said they wanted the opportunity to be able to chat, not talk, chat with a real life agent when something goes wrong. So again, you begin to see that the TMC is still very much part of that, but the technology and channels that we're using to interact and work with those travelers are very much changing. So tools to communicate directly with travelers and support them when something actually does go wrong is a big trend in the industry, and it's only actually going to get bigger. So travelers, they want that self-service capability. They want to be able to use kind of the OBT apps. But when something really goes wrong, they still want to be able to chat to a real life human. And that kind of human touch is critical in those cases. All right, so it's all about then keeping people happy, right? And that's easy, yeah? You guys know that, yeah? You can think about all your people in your travel program. Well, so yeah, maybe not that easy, right? So let me talk about kind of a couple of things that you can kind of start to think about and take away from this presentation. So, number one, you need to build goodwill with your travelers by showing them you care about them. And that starts with offering choice and customization. So you're going to have to get the NDC stuff kind of together in order to be able to cater for their well-being as well. There are so many different new types of employment and working arrangements, but too often things like supercommuting, I always want to say supercomputing, supercommuting, blended travel and so on are still governed by those policies that were actually created for something completely different. So our industry really is going to have to evolve corporate policies to meet these trends head on. Number three, as consumers, we all want to be sure that what we get matches what we actually purchased. So today that probably goes beyond things like, understanding the luggage allowance and, not getting hit by extra charges at the airport, or that our rooms look like the pictures. It's increasingly about how we kind of create full transparency into the offers that we show people. And that's all about building trust with the employee as well, and really kind of expanding the offers that we show them. Today's focus on well-being means that business travel needs to feel more like normal working day with time built in for R&R. So this isn't about, thankfully, creating a vacation for your employee, but it is about ensuring your people have the flexibility to enjoy the business travel experience when they're actually on that. And finally, all areas of travel industry are facing serious staffing challenges over the past 3 years. Coupled with those demands around more support because of disruption, we've got big strains on you and your TMC partners. I would really urge you guys to lean in on that AI technology, automate the right things. Really important. We often automate the wrong things and think that works, and make support available across a wide variety of technology channels moving forward. So on that, let me thank you for your time here today. Please come and talk to us if you want any more information about these trends or about DEEM. And again, thank you for the time.